What's going on, everybody? Today I'm going to do a way too early record prediction for Michigan in the 2026 season. And I put a lot of thought into this. You gotta take into account, who teams bring in, who they lose, kind of just the overall vibe of everything. But I think it'd be fun to kind of go over and say, well, how's Kyle Whittingham's first season going to go in Ann Arbor? So I kind of want to let me just get rid of the kind of obvious ones in my view. Western Michigan, UTEP, and for me, Rutgers. Let's put those three on the board. Those are W's. We all know why. It's Western Michigan and it's UTEP. Rutgers obviously has the best chance of beating us, but overall, it's just superior roster, superior coaches, superior everything. It is on the road in Rutgers at least, so they have that tiny advantage. But let's just put those wins on the board to start out. Oklahoma is the obvious first big test. I have this down as a win. Not many people do. A lot of people will look at this roster and say that there's three obvious losses, but I think that this is a win. I think that it's a revenge game to a degree. I think Oklahoma embarrassed us this past season, but we get them at home. They have the revenge factor. And I think that Oklahoma is net worse, if you will, compared to this past season, whereas Michigan is a net better. And I expect Oklahoma to be highly ranked. I expect them to be in the top 10. They're in my preseason top 10, right? Because I'm just being objective and saying, well, who are people bringing back? And Oklahoma bringing back John Mateer is the obvious biggest addition for them, or keep in this regard. But I just have this feeling that Michigan's going to have a game this year where people say that they should lose, but they're actually going to win it. And then there's going to be a game that's going to be frustrating as hell. I think that this is one of those games that everyone picks against Michigan, but they can pull one out at home. I think it's week 2. I think both teams are going to be rusty. So I don't think there's going to be a massive advantage for Oklahoma in that regard. But I do think it's a win. I'm relatively confident in that, to be honest with you, because Oklahoma, again, net worse, and you look at how they performed against Alabama in the playoff, it's not a great thing to build on for them. Michigan has just gotten better across the board everywhere. Coaches, receivers, everything. They retained a lot of good players. So I actually think that Oklahoma's a win. So then we get to Indiana. Indiana's a loss, okay? And there's no shame in that. They're the champs for a reason. Curt Cignetti is the best coach in college football, and I was holding off on that opinion until after the national title game out of respect for Kirby Smart. But I think that the job that Cignetti has done at Indiana is the single best and most miraculous coaching performance that we've seen possibly ever in this sport. For him to take the literal worst FBS team in history and turn it into an undefeated national champion in just his second year is about as good a coaching job as you can ask for. So until somebody beats Indiana straight up, I can't really pick against them. They got the best coach in college football, and they reloaded once again. They're not gonna be as good as they were this past season, Indiana, but they're gonna be very, very good, and I'm not shocked at that. When you got a coach like Cignetti, you're going to attract good guys. You got Nick Marsh coming in from Michigan State. He's going to be probably your Elijah Surratt replacement. You got a really solid quarterback in Josh Hoover, who, yes, he's a little turnover prone at TCU, but I think that Cignetti's going to be able to coach him up quite a bit. If he can make Curtis Rourke work from Ohio U, then I think that he can make Josh Hoover work. I just think that Indiana still has the much better roster and the better coaches across the board. So that's a loss. Iowa, I have as a win. They're always tough. They're always gritty. You can never take Iowa lightly. They're going to come to play. They're going to come to hit you in the mouth. But they're vanilla, and they do lack high-level talent and recruits. Michigan's roster is just simply better in most areas. And I say most because maybe Maybe Iowa's offensive line might be a smidge better. Maybe their linebackers will be better, but Michigan's just simply the better team. So I won't explain too much into that. Michigan State. Little brother doesn't have the horses to compete with Michigan right now. They just don't. The roster's depleted. It's not impressive. They got a much better coach. I like Pat Fitzgerald, but I expect Michigan to roll Michigan State again. I think it's going to be at least a few years, really, until Michigan State genuinely starts competing with teams like Michigan or Ohio State or Indiana or whoever. But I do like that as I'm borderline guaranteed win. I mean, it's a rivalry, so you can't guarantee anything. But I expect them to roll Michigan State. Penn State. This is the game that's going to frustrate Michigan fans, I think. There's going to be that game that Michigan is not supposed to lose, but they're going to lose. And I think it's going to be this one. Now, don't get it twisted. I'm not saying that I think Penn State's a better team than Michigan. I don't necessarily. I think they're maybe better in some position groups, but I don't think they're an inherently better team. Plus, we have them at home. So you could say that all the arrows point towards Michigan winning this game, but I think that Penn State is going to be pissed at their underachieving season. I think that all the Iowa State transfers coming in to play for their coach are going to play hard for him. I'm not sure if Matt Campbell is necessarily a upgrade to James Franklin. I think it might be more of a lateral move, but it's a change of scenery for them that I think they may have needed. But at the same time, across the board, Michigan is a little bit better, but Penn State is going to have a bounce back year. I expect them to probably go 9-3 or so in his first year. And 9-3 in the Big Ten is pretty good. So they also, they got better at numerous positions, including quarterback. I think Rocco Becht is a much better, more reliable quarterback than Ethan Grunkmeyer. Savvy vet. He's pretty accurate. He has good experience against quality teams. So I think that Rocco Becht's going to be a big reason that they win a lot more games this year. But I just have this feeling, and this is kind of the perpetual Michigan pessimist in me. I just feel like there's going to be that one game that Michigan's not supposed to lose, that they will, and I think it's going to be this one. UCLA I have as a win. They have the edge in almost every position group. UCLA has some pretty good athletes on their team, but the coaching staff is light years better at Michigan than it is UCLA. And I could see it maybe being close in the first half, but Michigan pulling away late. Eventually talent is going to prevail. I think it's just that simple. I think UCLA is a win. At Minnesota, I have as a win. It's not the easiest place to play football, but Minnesota lost a lot. I like PJ Fleck as a man. I like him as a coach, but they lost some of their best players to both the portal and the draft, and I just don't see them reloading enough to really compete with a much improved team like Michigan. So I do have Minnesota down as a win. Don't take them lightly. They're kind of like Iowa in that regard. I think that you gotta respect them enough to not take them lightly, but I do have Minnesota down as a victory. Now we get into some of the bigger losses here. I think at Oregon, to me, it's kind of an obvious loss in my opinion. They still have a top 10 coach in Dan Lanning. They still have a Heisman caliber quarterback in Dante Moore coming back. And they're at home, man. Autzen is a tough place to play and win football games. Not many people can do it. Curt Cignetti did it because he's Curt Cignetti. But most people go to Autzen and they lose for a reason. That's a tough place to play. And so I think that Michigan's probably going to be a couple years away before they have the horses to compete with teams like Oregon on the road. So I do have Oregon down as a loss. And lastly, it's Ohio State, and it's a rivalry, man. It's hard to predict these games because no matter how bad Michigan is, no matter how good Ohio State is, or vice versa, or whatever, it could be anybody's game. I think objectively speaking, Ohio State is just the better team right now. Plain and simple. They're at home as well. They're bringing back a Heisman candidate quarterback. They're bringing back the best wide receiver in the nation. And it seems like at the 11th hour, they were able to bring in some really quality guys out of the portal to replace some of those big playmakers that they had this season. I think that it's going to be – I think Michigan's going to have a really good shot next year at beating them at home. But I do think Ohio State takes back-to-back wins against Ohio State this coming season. Or against Michigan, this coming season. So what is that? That's a 8-4 overall record. I'm not a big guy on moral victories. A loss is a loss, and you shouldn't take losses lightly. You shouldn't be okay with losses necessarily. But you also have to be realistic. Yes, the coaching staff is much improved. Yes, the roster, you could say, is much improved. But this year's schedule is also much, much harder. And I think for them to go 8-4 in Whittingham's inaugural season is a solid start. I do. Again, not saying as a fan I would be okay with having an 8-4, 9-3 record every single season, but I wouldn't. I'd be patient. You gotta let the system marinate a bit. You gotta let him get acclimated to everything. So I don't think 8-4 with this particular schedule is that bad. Obviously, of the losses that I predict, Penn State's the most obvious one that we could win. And then actually, I would say Ohio State's probably the next best, just because it's a heated rivalry and there's a ton of vitriol there between the teams. And we've seen much lesser Michigan teams beat better Ohio State teams somewhat recently as well. So could they go 10-2? They absolutely could. I won't be shocked if they are. But I think just to be objective and fair and use as accurate analysis as I can, that's kind of the conclusion I come to, is 8-4 just seems realistic to me. I'll say 9-3, 8-4/9-3. Penn State could be a toss-up. It's that pessimistic side of me that thinks that Michigan's going to drop one that they shouldn't drop. It's that simple. So a lot of Michigan fans who are in their 20s and 30s who grew up with Rich Rod and Brady Hoke kind of know the struggle that, well, we grew up watching these horrible, horrible Michigan teams. So it's ingrained in me for a while to be pessimistic. But I am very optimistic, though, about just the overall trajectory of the future of the program. So looking forward to that. So I'm gonna do a way too early college football top 10 later. I'm excited to do that. If you guys like the content, again, I'm about 17 subscribers away from 500, which would be a fun little milestone to hit. So if you like it, consider subscribing. I try to put out as much content as I can. So with that said, thank you guys for watching, and go Blue.